Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be creating a floral card with some mixed media envelopes using this delicate Magnolia die from Altenew. And I'm going to be cutting out 3 flowers out of white cardstock. And then I'm going to be adding some ink blending to the flowers. So I'm starting with a light purple just on the edges of these tips of these petals. And then I'll move on to a medium shade of purple, again, just on those edges. And then finally, I'll end with a darker shade of purple, really just on those tips of those petals. And then also on those curved little pieces that will sort of be the edges of the flowers once it's all glued together. I'm then going to set this aside, and I'm using some shimmery, glittery spritz on the yellow centers of the flowers. And I'm going to set that aside, and I usually like to let that dry overnight. And so while that's drying, I'm going to create the background panel of my card. So I've die cut a white card shape out of a die with sort of a stitched edge, just to give it a little bit of interest. And then I'm using this off-white paste and using my sort of spatula tool here to sort of push it into the stencil, trying to get a nice even layer of paste, and then scraping off any excess so it's just like this, the depth of the stencil once I've filled in all of the stencil image. And while it's still wet, I'll wipe off the little excess that kind of forms on the edges, so I'll have a nice clean edge, and I'll let that dry overnight. And so the next day I have glued my flowers together, and now I'm adding the centers to the flowers that are a little bit shimmery with that spritz. I also decided to use some ribbon here, which is not something I typically use in my cards. So I'm just cutting a couple of small pieces, and I'm going to sort of create kind of a diagonal pattern with the 2 pieces. So to get these into place, I'm actually using some just regular Scotch tape and adhering the 2 edges to the back of the card panel, kind of where I want the ribbon to go. And then I'm going to repeat that with the other ribbon piece, so that I'll end up having 2 diagonal pieces of ribbon that are taped on the back of the panel. I went ahead and heat embossed with white embossing powder a little sentiment that says "Warmest thanks," and then I'm going to die cut it with this sort of sentiment strip die, and I'm going to do a second of the same shape so that I kind of double up that sentiment, so you give it a little bit of extra strength. Then I'm going to add a bunch of liquid adhesive to the back of my card panel, and I'm going to adhere that to the front of my card base. And then the next thing is to add the flowers. So I'm going to use some foam adhesive, just one tiny little piece, and sticking that in the back of the flowers. And then I'm going to line them up in a line, starting with the center one, placing that one first, kind of nestled right into sort of that stencil shape area, and then adding the top one, and then adding the bottom one, and then finishing by adding the sentiment as well on a little bit of foam tape. And that is the finished card. Pretty straightforward, but it did take a little bit of time to let that stencil paste dry, and then the shimmery spritz as well. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video.